Hello everyone, we're going to talk about if statements in this video. Go ahead and load up this web page. It's called JavaScript IF Statements.html, and make sure you have it in the browser and in Sublime Text over here too. Alright, if statements. I'm going to go back over to the browser here. So what is an if statement? An if statement allows us to run certain code based on whether something is true or false. So it's known as a control structure because it controls which code runs and which code doesn't run. So an example that I can think of right now off the top of my head is, let's say you made a game, and if somebody wins the game, you might have code that shows them an alert that says, hey, you won. And if they didn't win the game, you might run code that says, oh, sorry, you lost, or something like that. So this comes up all the time where, depending on certain conditions, we want certain code to run. Alright, so let's dive into the syntax right here. So here's what an if statement looks like. It starts out, I'm going to go ahead and copy and paste this into the Sublime Text Editor. So go ahead and copy that code chunk. First code block, go over to Sublime, and then somewhere around here, I think, let's see, where is it? If you scroll down the page to about, lots of code in this one. Line 312 or so is our script tag where we can play with this stuff. So I'm going to go ahead and paste this in here, and my dog's barking. Hang on a second, I better go figure out what he's barking about. Alright, not sure what that was about, but he seems to have settled down now. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and indent this code, put it inside that script tag like that. So what we've got here is if statements. They always start with this JavaScript keyword, if, and then we have parentheses. So we've got our opening parentheses and our closing parentheses over here. And inside the parentheses is what we call a Boolean expression. So we know what Boolean variables are, but we haven't talked about a Boolean expression yet. So anyways, we'll talk about that in a minute here. But we're just trying to figure out the structure of these if statements. So we got if followed by parentheses, and inside the parentheses is a Boolean expression. After the parentheses, we've got a pair of curly braces. So here's my first curly brace, and here's my the matching closing curly brace that goes with that. So now we've got a lot of things to talk about here. A Boolean expression is an expression that solves to either true or false. So I'll show you that in just a second here. So we'll get to Boolean expressions, but I want to talk about formatting a little bit here. So kind of like what I ended up the last video on, is if it helps you to keep track of your curly braces, it's okay to make your if statements look like this. So that's just fine. But like I said, a lot of times beginners will forget a pair of the closing parentheses or curly brace or something like that. But if it helps you to keep your curly braces in order to write your code like this, you can do it that way. That's fine with me. But I'm going to continue to do it this way. This is what I'm used to. And for me, I can see that the if statement starts here, and if I just drop a line down here, I can see here's where the if statement ends. So I like to do it that way. And then here's the body of the if statement, and that will be the code that runs if this Boolean expression is true. So what is a Boolean expression? Let's go back over to the browser here, and let's scroll on down. So this is what I just showed you, how you can put your curly braces here if you want to. And now we're at the section about Boolean expressions. And as I was saying, we've talked about expressions. Expressions are like equations that evaluate is the word we should use, that evaluate to a value. Well, a Boolean expression is an expression that will either evaluate to true or false. So right here, I have a Boolean expression right here. So 5 is greater than 3 plus 1. So that's either true or false. In this case, it's true. So if we solve for this, that comes out to 4, and 5 is greater than 4, so that's true. But if I would have turned my greater than sign and made it a less than sign, then my Boolean expression would evaluate to false. Okay, so so let's go ahead and use a Boolean expression inside of an if statement. So right here, let's go ahead and just copy this. So here's our if statement that has the Boolean expression that we were just talking about. So I'm going to copy that, and I'm going to go over to Sublime Text, and let's go ahead and get rid of that previous if statement. This isn't even valid JavaScript code because this doesn't make any sense. This is just a note that I had here. So let's go ahead and delete that entire example, and we'll paste this in. Now my formatting is all screwed up and it drives me crazy. So what I'm going to do is make it look like this. Whoops. Scrolled for me there. What happened there? There we go. Okay, I'm not sure what happened there. So I've got my first line of my if statement, and then my closing curly brace that ends the if statement is vertically aligned with my first line of my if statement, and the body of my if statement is all indented. In this case, it's just one line of code, but if I had more lines of code, they would all be indented like this one is. So here we go. We got if and then parentheses, and here's the closing parentheses. And then inside the parentheses, we have a Boolean expression. So in this case, this Boolean expression evaluates to true. So in that case, we're going to see this code run here. So let's go ahead and save that, bounce back to the browser, and refresh the page. And sure enough, we see the alert. So we see the code that was inside that if statement is running because the Boolean expression evaluated to true. So, all right, I'm going to go back to Sublime Text. Now, if I switch this around and put in a less than sign there and save it, now let's look at this code here. Now, in this case, what do you think is going to happen? The answer is nothing, because this will resolve to false, or it'll evaluate to false. And so we'll just skip over this code altogether and it won't run at all. So you can see how we use these if statements to control which code runs and which code doesn't run. In this case, it's not going to run. So just to prove it, I'm going to save that. And then when I refresh the page here, we should not see an alert, and I don't. So, all right, what's next here? What did I do? Okay, so that's the gist. That's the simplest form of an if statement. If something is true, run this code. If it's not true, then don't do anything. Okay, so here's another variation of the if statement. It's called an if-else statement. So in the previous example, we only ran code if something was true, and if it was false, we didn't do anything at all. But with if-else statements, I think we can just look at this code right here. But with if-else statements, it looks a lot like an if statement up until here. So that's just a regular if statement. But if the Boolean expression comes out to be false and we want to run some code in that case, then we add this else part to it. All right, so pay close attention to the syntax here. And here, you know what, I am going to go ahead and put this in Sublime Text, and then we'll play with it a little bit. So let's go ahead and copy that whole thing and go back over to Sublime Text, and we'll get rid of the if statement that we had before. I'll paste this. Now my formatting is all screwed up because of the way it got pasted, so I'm going to fix that real quick so it should look like this. So now everything is lined up the way I like it. Now notice the nesting of the code here. I've got my Boolean expression. If it's true, then all this code would run here. These are just comments, but let's just say there's code there. Notice that all these lines of code are indented, so it's easy to see that they are nested inside the true part of the if-else statement. Then we've got this here. What we've added, since we talked about our first if statement, is this right here. So if the Boolean expression up here resolves to false, then we'll skip over this code and this code will run. Okay, now I want to show you, if you want to format this differently, I can show you how some people do it. So I can go ahead and vertically align all my curly braces. I could do it like this if I wanted to. So if that helps you to keep all your curly braces lined up, then you can do it that way. That's fine with me. But just make sure the code is indented properly inside of those curly braces, and you'll have a much easier time of dealing with code and learning the syntax, and it'll be easier to read the code and find bugs and stuff like that. Alright, I'm going to go ahead and clear out the script tag. So we'll delete that. So I've got my empty script tag right here. Alright, so moving on, we'll do an example here that will be a little bit more like moving towards a real program. So let's scroll on down here and let's copy this code here in the code block. And so I'm going to copy that and paste it in my script tag here. And I'm just going to set this up. Got it. Formatting is so important. A little bit of space there. Okay, so let's see what we got here. This code we've seen before. So what we've got is we're declaring a variable which we call guess, and we're setting it equal to the return value of this prompt function. So whatever the user enters into the prompt box is going to be what this variable guess is storing. Okay, so that should look familiar to you, and then we get into our if-else statement here. So what we've got here is, here's our Boolean expression, and so let's take a look at what that prompt box is going to show too. It says, who was the first president of the United States? So that's the question we're answering, or we're asking them, and whatever their guess is going to be stored here. So then what we're doing is we're comparing what the value of guess is to this value right here. Okay, so if they enter George Washington just like this, then this code will run and it'll say correct, you win. But if they enter anything else, then this code will run. Now you might notice that there's 2 equal sign here instead of 1. And the reason why is because remember that the single equal sign is already used for another purpose. That's called the assignment operator. And if our code looked like that, what we'd really be doing here is we'd be assigning a value of George Washington to guess. So that would be a bug in our code, because basically we're wiping out what the user entered up here and we're replacing it with the correct answer. So when we want to assign a value, we use a single equal sign, but when we want to compare two values, so in this case I'm comparing the value of whatever this is storing to this value. When we want to compare two values, we use the double equal sign, and the double equal sign is called the equality operator. The single equal sign is called the assignment operator. So that's something that you'll trip over as a beginner. You'll forget to have 2 equal signs, and then you're not comparing, you're assigning. So be careful of that. Okay. So I'm going to make sure that I have the 2 equal sign there, 2 equal signs that is, and then I'm going to save this, bounce back over to the browser and refresh the page, and here's our prompt, who was the first president of the US, and I'll go ahead and get it right. You can play with this if you want. And it says correct, you win. Let me go ahead, I'll click OK here, and I'm going to refresh the page. Now I'm gonna get the wrong answer, so I'm just typing in gibberish. So what we'll see is the other code running. Sorry, you lose. Okay, so that's how those if-else statements work. So moving on down here, now we talked about formatting. We already talked about formatting, but you can kind of see how the structure of an if statement is sort of like the structure of a function in some ways. So the important thing is to make sure your curly brackets, you're not missing in either an opening or closing curly brace, or an opening or closing parentheses, and to make sure that your code is indented within the body of the if statement. Okay. Now there's another variation of an if statement. So we've covered a standard if statement, an if-else statement, and now I'm going to show you an if-else-if statement. So this gets a little bit confusing. So an if-else-if statement, we can evaluate more than one Boolean expression. So let me just go ahead and we'll take a look at this code sample. So let's go ahead and copy that, paste it over into our script tag. We can get rid of this because we're done with that. So we'll delete all that and then paste in the new stuff, and I gotta indent everything the way I want it to look, which is, whoops, like this. So everything's lined up nice and neat. So in this case, we're prompting the user to enter a color. So they enter a color, and then we go to our if statement. So we've got if, and then our Boolean expression. If the color equals red, then we're gonna alert, yes, the color of roses. Okay, now that's one Boolean expression, but let's use another Boolean expression. So look at this line right here. So what I've got is, actually let's focus on this part right here. I've got else space if, and when I put this, allows me to add another Boolean expression to my entire if statement. So after the else there's a space, and then if, parentheses, another Boolean expression, and then here this curly brace starts where the code will run if they enter the color blue. So if they do, then we'll see this alert, and then this curly brace closes that portion of the code, and then we've got another Boolean expression here that checks to see if they entered yellow. So this is probably the hairiest syntax that we've seen so far, but if we want to add multiple Boolean expressions, if we want to check for different conditions, then we use else space if, and then our Boolean expression goes in curly braces, or I'm sorry, in parentheses, and then the code that we want to run, if that condition is true here, would be inside of the curly braces. And then if you notice that, so we're checking for red here, and we check for blue here, and we check for yellow here, and then we finish off with just an else. And so what this is going to do is, if they entered something other than red, blue, or yellow, then this code will run. So let's go back and take a look at our web page here, and let's scroll on down to this next example right here. So here's what we've got for our structure of an if else if statement. So we've got one Boolean expression here. If it's true, then this code will run. If it's false, then we'll check this Boolean expression. If this Boolean expression is true, then this code will run. If that Boolean expression is, if this Boolean expression is false, then this code will run. Now it takes a little bit of getting used to understand exactly how this works, but here's an example I want to show you. In an if statement, only one branch of code can run. So let's look at this right here. So I've got two branches of code that could potentially run, and I'm calling these things inside the curly braces branches of code. So I've got a variable that's being set to 9, the age, and its name is age, and the first thing I do is I check to see if age is less than 10. Well, that's true, so that means that this is going to run. And then what happens is, as soon as the browser finds the first Boolean expression that's true, it runs it, and then it skips out of the rest of the if statement. So what would happen is this code would run here, and then it would skip all this stuff, and it would look for the next line of code after that. So look at this. Now what I've got here is dead code because this code will never run. But the funny thing is that this Boolean expression is also true. Age is less than 20. But because the first Boolean expression was true, that code runs, and then we break out of the entire if statement, and we'd look for the next line of code after the entire if statement. So that's an important concept about if statements. Only one branch of code is going to run an entire if statement. Okay, now things are going to get a little bit even more hairy, because we can actually nest if statements inside of one another. So consider this example here. I've got a little algorithm here that is going to tell us how our program should work. So if the user likes books, then ask them if they like sci-fi books. If the user likes sci-fi books, then recommend Frankenstein. If the user does not like sci-fi books, then recommend Gone with the Wind. Okay, and then if the user does not like books, then ask them if they like movies. If the user likes movies, then recommend the movie Social Networking. If the user does not like movies, then recommend that they take up knitting. Okay, this is a lot to swallow at once, but hopefully if you read through this, you should be able to understand what we're trying to do. So this is the way we want our program to work. So how would we write code to make that work? So I'm going to go ahead, and here's the solution right here. Let's go ahead and copy this big, huge program right here. So we'll copy that, take it over to Sublime Text. I'll get rid of everything else here. And let's see what happens when we paste. It's going to run off the screen. Alright, so got some formatting issues. I'll fix that real quick. Just need to tab everything over 2 times, it looks like. Alright, so let's walk through this code right here. So first we prompt the user, do you like books? Enter yes or no. So whatever they enter is going to be stored in this variable. Then we compare that variable with a double equal sign. If they answered yes, then that means the user liked books. So in that case, we're going to prompt them again. So look at how we're going to dive into this code branch right here. So look at all these lines of code right here make up the code branch for if the user likes books. And if you look at it closely, you can see that it's pretty easy to read because it's indented. All of that's indented properly. So your indentation is really extremely important, especially with these if statements. So anyways, if they say they like books, then we ask them, do you like sci-fi books? Enter yes or no. So if they enter yeah, so we're storing that in this variable here, and then right here we're using the variable in our Boolean expression. If they enter yes, then we prompt I recommend Frankenstein. If they entered anything other than yes, and I suppose that includes no, then we're recommending Gone with the Wind. So there is a problem with this program because if they enter foo, something that's neither yes or no, then we just recommend Gone with the Wind. So we could fix that if we wanted to, but for now we'll just leave it as is. Okay, so that whole branch of code runs if the user likes books. So let's see what happens if the user doesn't like books. So I'm just going to drop a line down here. So that's where this branch of code starts. So what we're doing here is if likes books equals no, then we're going to prompt the user and we're going to say, do you like movies? And we're going to store their answer in this variable likes movies. So then we compare their answer to if it's yes, if it's equal to yes, then we recommend social networking. Otherwise, we recommend knitting. Okay, so now here's the last part of our outer if statement. So we've seen 2 nested if statements. So this is going to take a little getting used to. So let's go through this one more time. If they like books, yes, then this code runs. Else if they entered no, then this code runs. And if they entered something other than yes or no, then this code runs here, and it says it was a yes/no question. I'll leave it up to you to go ahead and run this. I don't want to take up any more time than I have to. But anyways, hopefully you can understand. Now, programs get complicated. We have lots of branches of code that could possibly run, and a lot of times we nest these variations of if statements within one another. And it is so important to keep your code formatted and indented properly so that you can follow what's going on. Because if all of these lines were all flush with the left, it would be really hard to tell what branch is where and really what's going on. So it's extremely important to keep your code formatted properly. Okay, I'm gonna go back over to the web page here, and now we've finished most of what we need to talk about, but there's a few odds and ends I want to talk about before we finish up the video. There are times when you're not sure if a variable has been initialized or not, depending on how our code is set up to run and the conditions that exist when the code is running. So there are occasions when you won't know for sure if a variable has been initialized. So let's go ahead and copy this code sample right here. Whoops. Go back over to Sublime Text and clear out that whole script tag. That was a lot of code. That's probably the nastiest or the biggest chunk of code that I'll give you in these early videos. So I've cleared out my script tag right here, and now I'm going to go ahead and paste in my code. I'm going to format it a little bit better. Okay, so that looks better to me. So what I've got here is a variable that I've named x, and then look at this, here's my Boolean expression. So this actually is an expression. It evaluates to something, and if it has been initialized, then it will evaluate to true. So but in this case it hasn't been initialized, so what's going to happen here is it will evaluate to false. So you can use an if statement to check and see if a variable has been initialized or not, and that actually comes up quite a bit. Now I'm going to make things even more complicated for you, because here's a twist on this. So we'll do this trick quite a bit later on in the course, because like I said, there are times when you're not sure if a variable has been initialized because maybe certain code didn't run. So we'll use the if statement to check to see if a variable has been initialized. But there's one real big gotcha to this. So you can run this if you'd like. I'm to try and keep this video somewhat short. I'm not going to run it, so I'm going to go ahead and delete it right now. Then I'm going to go back over to the web page, and now here's the gotcha to what I was just telling you about. So let's go back. This is the last code block for this this video. Let's copy that and then paste it in here. Reformat it a little bit so everything lines up nice and neat. Okay, now look at this. Now in this case our variable x is being initialized. It's being initialized to 0. Now here's the thing, is in programming languages 0 is considered equal to false. So if I try this trick here to test to see if a variable is initialized, this won't work right here. Now this is a quirk, and every language has its quirks. But anyways, so there, if a variable can be set to 0, then this won't work. I'll have to do something else, and we'll learn about that later. So this is kind of extra stuff, but it's important because it can really trip up beginners. So anyways, just remember that 0 will be considered equal to false in programming languages. All right, that'll do it.